I'm fascinated with ideas about a growing epidemic of loneliness, how that affects us all, and how we as a society have been really slow to actually respond to that.
You're listening to Conscious Mind, a show that explores what fascinates us.
Welcome back to Conscious Mind on Silver Hill Radio. I'm Molly Norton, and for our second episode, we are welcoming a very special guest, Dr. Jeff Katzman, Director of Education at Silver Hill Hospital, an exceptionally talented and creative person. Okay, Jeff, welcome to the radio studio. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So usually we start our interviews with, at least with our medical staff that we're interviewing, we like to ask, what was the most interesting thing you learned in medical school? It usually generates a pretty interesting conversation.
Okay, so I have a few things come to my mind when you ask me that question. So, interesting is a big word. Well, I had no doctors anywhere in my family, so I had never shadowed in a hospital. So I had gone to Africa for 4 months, working in a village and practicing medicine with some doctors in the village of Bamandu in Sierra Leone. And I thought that's what medicine was. And then I had planned to take a year off before medical school, but I got in the day before school started to UC San Diego. I was the last one admitted to the class.
Wow.
And everyone there had already taken all biochemistry, microbiology, these courses in college. I had not. It was all brand new to me. So I was a little overwhelmed, thinking I was not the sharpest in the tack in my class. It's a pretty competitive place to get in. And so I did, though, really kind of peak up when we started studying microbiology, because I had just been in Africa and learned all about schistosomiasis and malaria, and I was so interested in all of their mechanisms. So that really kind of turned my brain on a little bit from the paper into kind of applications. And I also got pretty interested in neuroscience and neurobiology. The brain tracks were all really interesting to me, but I couldn't remember them so well. But in most medical schools, there's something called a play, the first year play, where you kind of roast some of your teachers, and you maybe put on some skits. And so we did a couple of those, and I actually wrote this song about the brain. And I don't remember it so much, but I can sing you a little part of it.
Please do sing the song about the brain.
Yeah, well, I can tell you just a little bit. So it went, oh, I can tell you why a lesion near my red nuclei would make it pretty tough to move my eye. It would be huge, like I was high. And it kind of went from there. And then it ended, the admissions director, his name was Dr. Spooner. And so it ended with, I said, and perhaps Dr. Spooner would have sent the letter sooner if I only had a brain.
That's amazing.
So there you go. My.
Did you do that in front of a room full of people?
Yeah, I think my voice was a little better at the time, but I was actually dressed as a scarecrow, and my friend as Dorothy, and we danced around as I sang the brain, and it actually helped me. Like in different moments, people were shocked that I kind of knew about some brain tracks.
You make medical school sound really fun, Dr.
Yeah, I do.
Katzman.
Those were my fun moments. Yes.
So what about microbiology was so what about that was so interesting to you?
I think it was because when I was in Africa, I was so determined not to get some of these diseases. It's just schistosomiasis can happen if you get water on you from the various rivers. And so it was very, very interesting to understand, this is the mechanism. This is how it happens.
Okay.
This is why this medication works. And so it actually was kind of the first time in medical school early on where I had an application in the real world that matched learning science.
It provided a lot of context to what you had experienced.
Yeah.
Wow. So, microbiology involves the smallest, tiniest pieces of things that affect and make up humans. In general, from a broader standpoint, what fascinates you the most about humans, about people? you're in that field. So
Or really honestly, what fascinates me the most about humans is how much we need each other, and what happens when we're left without contact, without being attuned to what happens to us in the beginning of life if we're not given kind of the love and attention that a human being requires at the beginning of life, and the science that's emerged around that. I'm fascinated with ideas about a growing epidemic of loneliness and how that affects us all, and how we as a society have been really slow to actually respond to that. Even in my own medical school psychiatric residency in 25 years at University of New Mexico, it would be like, oh, they don't need help, they're just lonely. And so I am really interested in how we need each other and how we can start to think about helping each other across the lifespan.
it's an interesting subject because in some ways we're more connected now than ever because of technology, in terms of people being able to reach each other all across the globe in various different formats. And at the same time, evidence seems to be showing that things like social media and internet use and all of those things actually can have a detrimental effect
Yes.
on mental health. So what do you make of that? That connection is so important and so fundamental, but at the same time can work against you too?
Yeah, I think we post only certain things about ourselves on social media, and so when we spend a lot of time looking at it, it can really leave us feeling like we're not part of the party, like we've got FOMO and we don't belong, and look at all these happy people and not many people said hello on my birthday or whatever might happen on social media.
Right.
And we've become so involved with spending time on our tablets and computers and phones that it's actually hard to spend time face to face, even in a conversation like we're having
Right,
now,
right.
For an extended period of time,
Right.
without somebody looking at their phone to even make sure that there's nothing new there. So
I promise I won't look at my phone
no,
during our
no, we're
interview.
good. But I think so. I think we're losing practice actually at how to be with each other, and we don't teach that even as a skill to kids.
Yeah, well, and it's an inauthentic connection, really.
Right.
Like if it's not a true in person, deep with meaning conversation, it's superficial, right?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
don't think it has the same impact.
And I would add to it, it's also fairly linear, so that there's someone will post something and then there's a response. But what it misses is anything about play and how as humans we need to play with one another. And we do that as kids, and at least we used to when I was growing up. People would hang out on the streets and play basketball or whatever they were going to do, and neighborhoods were generally safe, and you could actually just go somewhere for a play date. And kids learn so much interacting this way and how to socialize and how to be part of a group. These days, those activities are organized by grown-ups. So kids learn to play in a soccer league run by grown-ups who post scores on computers. So we've lost really that element of being human around being playful with each other, which I think contributes to the experience of loneliness, really.
How do we fix that?
Yeah, well,
Can we go back?
yeah, I think there's a lot I could say about this.
Yeah.
But one thing is, I think it's really important to think about how to become a little more playful at work, and how we have so many responsibilities in all of our workplaces, but how we spend all day with each other. So how can we have a little bit goofier conversations at moments, and play around with ideas? I've done improvisational theater for 30 years and really spent a lot of time thinking about the guidelines of improvisation and how those can be applied to life, and things like saying yes to each other and becoming comfortable with not knowing what's coming next, like we're doing right now.
Right.
Become really a way to get comfortable with being with other people.
Yeah, and it's for that precise reason that started the radio station.
Yes.
This is fun, and this is something that we can do together and something we can share as a community.
Yeah, you already got me singing on the radio.
Yeah, I
I've
know.
never sung on the radio
I
before.
heard
So there you
someone
go.
singing about brains on the radio.
Yes.
What a great way to spend a
Yes.
Thursday afternoon at work. So in terms of, you ended up going into psychiatry, obviously. So you were in medical school, you were fascinated in microbiology. You were very interested in human relationships. Was there anything else that drove you specifically to the specialty of psychiatry?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there was no doctors in my family, so I didn't grow up with all those abbreviations. Like, I didn't grow up with doctor talk at the table.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little shocking when I got into third year of medical school and I was on these hospital wards, learning to document in charts and write in abbreviations, and this is what the roles are and this is what we do. And there was not so much emphasis on human connectedness there until I got to the psychiatry rotation, and I was allowed to stay late. And so I met with patients and I was part of groups. But I mean, really honestly, then I stayed and I did cooking class with them and ate dinner with them. And it was reminding me of many years I had been a camp counselor and enjoyed just interacting in spontaneous ways. And suddenly these patients were human beings, and they were people, and we were spending time together. And to me, that's what really pulled me into psychiatry.
Amazing. So another thing I like to ask, because I find it very interesting, is thinking about the future. So if you were to get in a time machine today, which maybe someday we'll have time machines because we're getting pretty advanced, and if you were to travel 30 years in the future, so that would take us to 2053, what do you think mental health care will look like?
Yeah.
You step out of the time machine and you look around. You take a walk down to Silver Hill Hospital. If we're still here.
I have two visions. Here's my two visions. One is that we've become more automatized, and we're who needs people anyway when computers can generate the right, correct interpretations, and you can just push a button and it will tell you what you need to know, and why do people need people anyway? And what we really need are quality measures, more and more of them to prove to accrediting bodies actually that we're doing a good job. But actually at the heart of doing a good job is not necessarily that. My other image is that we've woken up and realized that actually what we need more than anything as human beings is to know that we've been understood, and that our story and who we are can be held in the mind of another person, and that we will wake up after this time machine journey to more and more to the idea that we need to be there for each other in all kinds of ways, and that ultimately is what is so profoundly healing.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll have to make some pretty big mistakes along the way to realize that we do need to go back. We do need to go back to some of the fundamental ways that we were doing things when we were kids and we were playing outside and we didn't have all of this, these systems and these rules and these things that have changed how we develop, really.
Right. And I love all those systems and rules on the one hand, and I know that they measure that we're doing certain things correctly, but in a hectic, busy day, it can make it so that I've stared at the electronic medical record a little too long while a patient was just in front of me, and I didn't. I missed important stuff, probably the most important stuff.
Yeah. So my final closing question for you, Dr. Katzman, is, and this is something I think about a lot. I think about conversations a lot. I think about human connection. I think about those times when you're at a dinner party and you get into a really good conversation with someone, and it's almost like you and that person are the only people in the world, and you really get like sucked in by the content. And I think that's one of the coolest parts about being human, is just what we learn from each other and other people's experiences. So if you can, what's a great conversation you had with someone recently, and what about that conversation made it great?
Yeah, I've had So many, so many come to mind. I want to say frequently when I'm working with our trainees here and we're able to riff around a psychological concept, like a deep conversation around how, for example, we become isolated and what does that mean psychologically, and what is connection, and we begin to riff as a group. I feel so honored and lucky to be with very, very bright trainees like we have here. I also progressively have spent time in, in nature, and just the other night was walking along out in our neighborhood by the ocean in more northern Connecticut, and there was just somebody there who was walking their dog, and we decided to stop and we decided to have an exchange that we might not have otherwise had. And really, the details of that conversation are not as important as the fact that I decided to stop and comment about their dog, and we wound up in a 20-minute conversation, just two strangers, and I felt much better as a result of having reached out and been connected to by this stranger by the water.
That's exactly, I think, what you've been talking about is the magic of just human connection. It doesn't need to be anything more than two strangers talking about anything for a few minutes, and the impact that has on how you feel. And I think all of us can probably relate to that and experiences that we've had.
Yeah, I do want to say, I've been here for a couple years and at Silver Hill, and one of the reasons that I came here was because that's just been my experience of people across the board here in the organization, is that people stop and listen and want to know you, whether that's staff with each other. And sometimes I know this can be a big, and it's a big place and with different houses and can be a little isolating, but my general sense here is one of people wanting to connect with each other, and it's, so for me, a privilege to get to work at a place where I feel that in the background.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a special thing about Silver Hill is our connection with each other. Our staff you walk around this place and you ask people what's the best part of working at Silver Hill, and 90% of people say my peers, my colleagues, the relationships I have with the people that work here. Mm-hmm. Yes, they're connected to the mission, they're connected to taking care of the patients and all of the things that they went into their careers for, but there's a really special bond between the people that work here, definitely. So I think the moral of the story here at the end of our conversation is talk to strangers more.
Yeah.
Jeff is not a stranger to me anymore. Wasn't before the interview, but certainly isn't now. And there's so much you can get out of those everyday interactions with people. So say hello to the person in the grocery store as you're browsing the same aisle. Stop and talk to the person walking their dog.
Yeah, and I really have learned a lot from improvisational theater that way, because it leaves you in a situation where you're up on stage with another person and you got to create something out of nothing, and you can't just force the conversation. You've got to listen and you've got to provide information, and together you're building something. And if you're listening and if you're adding, magic can happen. And I find that that's true in life in general, exactly like you're saying, Molly. Like, no matter where you are, it's amazing the kind of conversations, if you have energy and don't want to just shut your eyes, that you can have with an Uber driver for half an hour,
right.
And how actually it can leave you feeling a little bit different
right.
all day long.
Right, and a little humor goes a long way too. Yeah. Right, find that running into strangers when there's weird stuff happening around you too, and that connection that you have with people instantly if something's going on in the periphery, and we're just such social beings, and it amazes me.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Katzman, for spending time with me today. We hope to have you back soon. I hope everyone has enjoyed this episode of Conscious Mind, and we are going to make this a monthly program, so we will be back with you in the month of December with a brand new episode with a brand new interview.
And I'm available if anyone wants to sign me up for Broadway for some singing production.
Yes, for those of you
yes.
listening, if
Yes.
you liked the song about the
Yes.
brain, he can be...
I can find the full
he can
lyrics
be-
even.
Yes, he will contract him
Yes.
out to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
You've been listening to Conscious Mind on Silver Hill Radio. We'd love to hear from you. For questions and content submissions or ideas, please email us at silverhillradio@gmail.com.